Testing results have been released, showing that the pandemic school closures have caused student scores to decline to levels not seen in decades. Today, I'm going to talk about the analysis and also why school districts have barely used any of the federal money allocated to help fix the problem. I'm Michele Carroll. Welcome to the News Diet, where I give you to-the-point news Monday through Thursday. Well, the most comprehensive analysis into the impact the pandemic had on students has released their findings. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP, also referred to as the nation's report card, conducted testing at both public and private schools across the country. They tested 224,000 fourth graders from 5,700 schools and 222,000 eighth graders from about 5,100 schools between January and March of this year. What it showed is that student learning declined across the country, in every single state, across racial groups, and across lower and higher achievement levels, especially when it came to math scores. Overall, these scores dropped to proficiency levels not seen in decades, or maybe even ever. Of course, we know that for the last 2 years, students have had to deal with school closures, which meant navigating remote learning. This move for elementary and secondary school-age children was unprecedented, and families really struggled to adapt to a world where everyone was home 24/7, where the internet was being used by all household members all day, and where spaces were being shared for work, school, and play. And even when schools did start to reopen, the systems struggled to adjust to the new world of mask mandates, COVID testing, quarantines, virus variants, staffing shortages, and rising mental health and behavioral crises. So what were the scores? Well, from 2019 to the beginning of this year, the results showed that the percentage of eighth graders rated either proficient or better in math went from 34% in 2019 down to 27%. On the same 500-point scale, fourth graders fell 5 points, which makes for the steepest declines ever recorded. Some districts even saw worse scores. In Cleveland, the average test score for fourth graders fell 15 points in math and 16 points in reading. For eighth graders, it was an 8-point drop in math and 7 points in reading. The chief executive of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, Eric Gordon, responded by saying, quote, "This is a very clear indicator of the real impact on learning on our kids for the last 2 years." It's probably worth noting at this point that even the pre-pandemic scores are quite low. I mean, we're talking a 34% math proficiency level among eighth graders. So the decline likely just exacerbates the already struggling education system. Unfortunately, the pandemic seemed to impact already struggling students the most. In 2019, 19% of fourth graders were considered what's called below NAEP basic, which means they scored the lowest. Well, this year, that number went up to 25%. Another data point is that the bottom 10% of fourth graders dropped 7 points out of the 500, while the top 10% only dropped by 2 points. A survey connected to these tests say this likely has a lot to do with environmental and economic factors that allowed higher performing students to have easier access to devices and supplies needed to continue learning at home, as well as the space or privacy to engage in their courses and possibly even hiring extra help like tutors. These results are being used by figures around the country who fought against the mass school closures. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis tweeted, quote, "We kept schools open in 2020, and today's NAEP results once again prove we made the right decision." And also school choice advocates, which is the idea of parents using the public funds allocated to their child to instead use it at another school if they wish, claiming that it's not right to be forced to use public school if you don't agree with them. However, the Washington Post points out that states that had some of the longest school closures, like California, had similar results to those of other states that opened sooner, like Florida and Texas. In fact, the Los Angeles School District actually saw eighth grade reading scores rise by 9 points. So the question now is, what do we do from here? These results show that learning levels have taken students back by months, if not years. And especially at elementary school ages, these 2 years of subpar education can make a big difference results in these kids' futures. Some obvious solutions are resources in the form of more educators, more services like tutoring and summer or after-school programs, and mental health resources. Now, investments in these areas require money. So what's interesting is that out of the $190 billion that the education system has been allocated in pandemic relief funds, very little of it has been spent. In 2020, then President Trump put aside around $67.5 billion for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And then in 2021, President Biden added another installment of $122 billion. But less than 15% of that installment has been used. And what's even more noteworthy is that it seems like the districts using the least amount of that funding are also the ones where the students are scoring the lowest, some of them only spending 5% or less. According to the survey's interviews with educators, the reasons for not using the money has to do with a desire to make the funds last, the difficulty in filling positions, delays in access, bureaucracies, and supply chain issues. Apparently, many school districts are planning to start applying these funds this year and next. At least 20% must be used to go towards reversing learning losses, but otherwise, schools are pretty free to use the funds as they please. Some reported uses so far have been for new curriculums, supplies, improved infrastructures, and teacher bonuses. Some schools say they have plans to use the funding for counseling programs for students psychologically affected by the pandemic, and possibly even those who've been affected by other issues like rising rates in crime and drug use. The last few months of the pandemic have been incredibly mild compared to the last 2 years, with COVID strains weakening over time. So with the holiday months approaching when historically cases have spiked, we'll have to see if schools attempt to enact lockdowns again now that we've seen this data. You've just been informed, so now it's time to get on with your day. I'm Michele Carroll. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode and want to continue following a healthier alternative for staying informed, where I forgo partisan fighting and fear-driven narratives, then please be sure to hit that subscribe button, as of course you'll get more of this show in your feed, and also you'll be helping this new channel grow and reject sensational media. Thank you so much for your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.